The war had been going on for 23 years, and Admiral Marcus Blake was tired of losing. He stood on the bridge of the USS Intrepid, watching the star charts that showed too much red. Red meant enemy territory. Red meant the Catherian Empire was winning. "Sir, the new personnel files are here," said Commander Lisa Park, holding a datapad. She was one of the few other humans on the ship. Most of the Confederation fleet was made up of aliens from peaceful worlds with nice weather and easy lives. Blake took the pad and scrolled through the names. New officers, new analysts, new engineers, all replacements for people who had died in the last battle. The battle they had lost, just like all the others. One name caught his eye. Lieutenant Katie Sullivan, age 23, from Earth, tactical analyst. Blake frowned. Earth was what the other species called a death world, a planet so dangerous that most aliens needed protective suits just to visit. The gravity was too strong, the weather too wild, the animals too mean. Blake had always wondered how humans had survived there at all. "When does Sullivan arrive?" he asked. "Tomorrow, sir. She's coming on the transport from Sector 7. Blake nodded and handed back the pad. Another human might be useful. The aliens were smart, but they thought differently. Sometimes Blake felt like he was the only one who understood that this war was not going the way it should. The next day, Katie Sullivan walked onto the bridge. She was small, maybe 5 feet 4 inches tall, with dark hair pulled back in a tight bun. Her uniform was crisp and clean, but Blake noticed her eyes. They moved constantly, taking in everything around her. She looked at the star charts, the crew stations, the weapon displays. She looked like she was reading the whole ship. "Lieutenant Sullivan reporting for duty, sir," she said, giving a sharp salute. "Welcome aboard, Lieutenant. Commander Park will show you to your station." Blake watched as Park led Sullivan to the tactical analysis section. The young woman sat down at her computer and immediately began working. Her fingers moved fast across the keyboard, pulling up battle reports and fleet movements. Within an hour, she had accessed more data than most analysts looked at in a week. The other officers noticed too. Captain Ryan Torres, who ran special operations, stopped by Blake's chair. "The new girl is intense," Torres said quietly. "She's been reading battle reports for 3 hours straight. Hasn't even taken a break." Blake looked over at Sullivan's station. She was leaning forward, studying multiple screens at once. Her eyes darted between displays showing enemy ship movements, gravitational data, and hyperspace corridor maps. Most people could only focus on one screen at a time. "She's from Earth," Blake said. Torres nodded. "That explains it. Deathworlders are different." Over the next few days, Blake kept watching Sullivan work. She arrived early and stayed late. She asked questions that made the other analysts uncomfortable. Questions like, "Why do we always attack from the same angles?" And, "Has anyone mapped the retreat patterns?" On her 4th day, Sullivan approached Commander Park with a datapad full of charts and numbers. "Ma'am, I've been studying the last 17 battles with the Catherians. I think I found something." Park looked tired. Everyone looked tired these days. "What did you find, Lieutenant?" "They're not retreating randomly. Look at this." Sullivan pulled up a 3-dimensional map showing ship movements. "Every time we push them back, they go through the same hyperspace corridors. But it's not the same pattern every time. It's more complex." Park studied the display. "I don't see it." "Here, let me show you." Sullivan's fingers danced over the controls, highlighting different retreat routes in different colors. "See how they always move toward gravitational weak points? They're not just running away. They're repositioning based on tidal forces." "Tidal forces?" "Yes, ma'am. The pull of gravity between stars and planets. It affects hyperspace travel, but most species can't feel it directly. They need computers to calculate it." Park frowned. "And you can feel it?" Sullivan looked embarrassed. "Not exactly feel it. But growing up on Earth teaches you to notice patterns in chaos. Our weather changes every day. Our earthquakes, our storms, our animal migrations. Everything moves in patterns that look random, but aren't." Park wasn't convinced, but she took Sullivan's report to Admiral Blake. That evening, Blake called the young lieutenant to his office. "Tell me about these patterns, Sullivan. Katie spread her charts across Blake's desk. Sir, the Catherians are playing a game we don't understand. We think we're fighting random battles, but they're connected. Each retreat puts their ships in position for the next attack. Blake studied the charts. The numbers meant something, but he couldn't see what Sullivan saw. Based on this analysis, where will they hit next? Sullivan pointed to a star system on the edge of Confederation space. Proxima Station, sir. They'll come from 3 directions at once, using the asteroid field as cover. Blake looked at the tactical display. Proxima Station was heavily defended. The idea that the enemy could coordinate a 3-way attack seemed impossible. Lieutenant, Proxima Station has never been attacked. It's too well protected. That's exactly why they'll attack it, sir. We think it's safe, so we won't be ready. Blake wanted to believe her, but the plan for Proxima Station was already set. The Confederation fleet would attack a Catherian supply base 2 systems away. It was a good plan, designed by experienced officers who had been fighting this war for decades. I appreciate your analysis, Lieutenant, but the battle plan is already approved. Sullivan's jaw tightened, but she nodded. Yes, sir. 2 weeks later, the fleet prepared for the attack on the Catherian supply base. Blake watched from the bridge as his ships moved into position. It should have been an easy victory. Intelligence reported light enemy defenses and no major fleet presence. The attack began at 0800 hours. Blake's forces jumped out of hyperspace and found exactly what they expected, a small supply station with minimal defenses. The battle lasted only 30 minutes. But as Blake's fleet celebrated their victory, urgent messages started coming in from across Confederation space. The Catherians had launched simultaneous attacks on 12 different targets. The biggest attack was at Proxima Station. Blake watched the reports with growing horror. 3 Catherian fleets had appeared around Proxima Station exactly as Sullivan had predicted. They came from 3 directions, using the asteroid field as cover. The station's defenses held for 4 hours before failing. By the time Blake's fleet could respond, Proxima Station was gone. Along with it, 15,000 Confederation personnel and the entire 3rd Defense Wing. Blake found Sullivan in the tactical analysis section, working quietly at her station. She looked up when he approached, and he saw no satisfaction in her eyes, only sadness. I'm sorry about Proxima Station, sir, she said. Blake sat down in the chair next to her desk. How did you know? Pattern recognition, sir. Growing up on Earth means learning to see connections that others miss. Every day on our world, something is trying to kill you. The weather, the animals, the geography. You learn to spot danger before it arrives, or you don't survive. Blake looked at the young woman with new respect. She had tried to warn them and they hadn't listened. Now, good people were dead because the fleet command couldn't see what a 23-year-old analyst from a Deathworld could see clearly. What else do you see, Lieutenant? Sullivan turned back to her screens, calling up new data about enemy movements and fleet positions. I see that we're fighting this war wrong, sir. The Catherians aren't just another enemy fleet. They think differently than we do, and if we want to win, we need to start thinking differently too. Blake nodded slowly. Maybe it was time to listen to the girl from the dangerous world. Maybe she understood something about fighting that the rest of them had forgotten. Outside, the ship's windows, the stars looked the same as always. But Blake knew that something had changed. The war was about to become very different. Admiral Blake could not sleep. 3 days had passed since Proxima Station fell, and the loss kept eating at him. 15,000 people dead because he had not listened to a young lieutenant from Earth. He walked through the empty corridors of his ship at 2 a.m. thinking about all the mistakes he had made. When he reached his office, he was surprised to find Lieutenant Katie Sullivan sitting outside his door. Lieutenant, what are you doing here? Katie stood up quickly. Sir, I've been waiting to speak with you. I have new information about enemy movements. Blake looked at the datapad in her hands. It was covered with charts and numbers, just like before. This time he was going to listen. Come in. Blake's office was small but comfortable. He poured 2 cups of coffee and sat down across from Katie. She spread her charts on his desk, and he could see she had been working for hours. Her eyes were red from staring at screens, but her voice was clear and strong. Sir, I've analyzed the attack patterns from the last 6 months. The Catherians aren't just winning random battles, they're reshaping the entire war zone. Blake studied the star map she showed him. Red dots marked enemy victories, blue dots marked Confederation wins. There were far too many red dots. Explain it to me like I'm stupid, Lieutenant. Katie smiled for the first time since he had met her. Sir, imagine you're playing chess, but your opponent is playing a different game. We think each battle is separate, like individual chess moves. But the Catherians are playing something more like building a wall. She pointed to different areas on the map. Each victory gives them control of specific hyperspace routes. They're not trying to destroy our fleets. They're trying to control how we can move through space. Blake saw it now. The enemy victories formed a pattern that cut Confederation space into smaller pieces. They're dividing us. Exactly, sir. And once we're divided, they can defeat us, piece by piece. Blake leaned back in his chair. So how do we stop them? Katie pulled up another chart. We stop thinking like we're fighting a normal war. The Catherians have advantages we can't match. Their ships are bigger, their technology is better, and they can coordinate perfectly because of their hive mind. Then how do we win? We use our advantages, sir. Humans think differently than other species. We're good at handling chaos and making quick decisions. We can adapt faster than they can. Blake was interested now. What kind of adaptation? Katie stood up and walked to the wall display. She called up a tactical simulation that showed fleet movements in 3 dimensions. I call it cascade warfare, sir. Instead of fighting where the enemy expects us to fight, we create chain reactions. We hit them in places that force them to respond, then hit them again while they're responding. The simulation showed small human forces attacking enemy supply lines. Each attack caused the Catherians to move ships to defend, which opened up new targets for more attacks. It's like pushing over dominoes, Katie explained. One small push causes a bigger reaction, which causes an even bigger reaction. Blake watched the simulation run through several scenarios. In each one, small human forces caused large enemy fleets to waste time and resources, chasing threats that disappeared before they could be caught. This is interesting, Lieutenant, but it's just theory. We need to test it. Katie nodded. I know. Someone who might help us, sir. Captain Ryan Torres runs special operations. His teams are used to working independently and making quick decisions. The next morning, Blake called Torres to his office. The captain was a tough man who had been fighting the Catherians for 8 years. He listened to Katie's presentation with skeptical eyes. So you want my teams to buzz around like angry bees, stinging the enemy and running away? Not exactly, sir, Katie said. More like wolves hunting in packs. Each attack is coordinated with the others, but each team makes its own tactical decisions. Rez studied the tactical displays. And you think this will work better than our current strategy? Our current strategy isn't working at all, sir. We've lost more territory in the last year than in the previous 5 years combined. Torres looked at Admiral Blake. What do you think, sir? Blake made his decision. We try it. Lieutenant Sullivan, I'm assigning you to work with Captain Torres. You'll have access to all tactical data and direct communication with special operations teams. Katie's eyes widened. Sir, I'm just an analyst. You're the analyst who predicted Proxima Station. That makes you more valuable than half my senior staff. Over the next 2 weeks, Katie worked closely with Torres and his team leaders. She taught them to see patterns in enemy movements and to think about battles as connected events rather than isolated fights. The alien officers were harder to convince. Commander Vextar, a tall, blue-skinned strategist from the peaceful world of Altara, thought Katie's ideas were too risky. This human child wants us to abandon proven tactics for wild theories, he told Admiral Blake during a staff meeting. Blake looked around the conference table at his senior officers. Most of them agreed with Vextar. They had been trained in traditional military doctrine at the best schools in Confederation space. Commander Vextar, our proven tactics have lost us 17 major battles in the last 2 years. Maybe it's time to try something new. The test came at the mining colony of New Geneva. Intelligence reported that a Catherian fleet was moving toward the colony, probably to capture its rare metal mines. The traditional response would be to reinforce New Geneva's defenses and fight a defensive battle. Katie suggested something different. We evacuate the civilians and turn the colony into a trap. Torres liked the idea. We mine the asteroid fields around the colony and set up ambush points at key locations. When the enemy arrives expecting easy conquest, they get a surprise. Blake approved the plan, but many of his officers were unhappy. They thought abandoning a colony, even temporarily, was cowardly. Katie spent 3 days setting up the trap. She positioned small teams of ships throughout the asteroid field, each team equipped with hit-and-run weapons and fast engines. She studied the gravitational patterns around New Geneva and predicted exactly where the enemy ships would emerge from hyperspace. When the Cytherian fleet arrived, they found an empty colony and no visible defenses. Their ships moved into the asteroid field, confident and careless. That's when Katie's trap was sprung. Human ships appeared from behind asteroids, fired their weapons, and disappeared before the enemy could respond. Gravity mines exploded in carefully timed sequences, forcing Cytherian ships into narrow corridors where more ambushes waited. The enemy fleet tried to coordinate their response, but Katie had predicted this too. Every time they gathered ships to hunt down the human attackers, she had Torres hit them from a different direction. The battle lasted 6 hours. When it ended, the Cytherian fleet retreated for the first time in the war. They had lost 12 ships and gained nothing. Blake stood on his bridge watching the enemy ships jump back into hyperspace. Around him, his officers were quiet. They had just seen something that should have been impossible. "Sir," said Commander Park, "the enemy fleet is withdrawing completely. They're leaving the entire sector." Blake turned to Katie, who was studying the tactical displays with tired eyes. "Lieutenant, how did you know they would retreat?" Katie looked up from her screens. "Because they've never faced chaos before, sir. The Cytherians are used to fighting predictable enemies. When we hit them with random attacks from multiple directions, their hive mind couldn't process all the variables fast enough." Torres was grinning. "Their greatest strength became their weakness." Blake nodded slowly. The young woman from Earth had done something that experienced military commanders thought was impossible. She had turned human disadvantages into advantages, but Katie wasn't celebrating. She was already working on new charts and battle plans. "This is just the beginning, sir. Now that we know cascade warfare works, we can use it on a larger scale. We can start taking back territory." Blake looked at the star charts on the wall. For the first time in years, he felt hope. The girl from the Y. Deathworld had shown them a new way to fight. The war was about to change. The victory at New Geneva spread through the Confederation fleet like wildfire. For the first time in 23 years, human tactics had forced a Cytherian fleet to retreat without completing their mission. Officers who had never heard of Katie Sullivan were suddenly asking questions about cascade warfare and Deathworld thinking, but the enemy was listening too. Admiral Blake promoted Katie to Strategic Operations Director, giving her access to intelligence from across the war zone. She now worked directly under him, coordinating with fleet commanders in 12 different sectors. Her small office was filled with star charts, battle reports, and gravitational data that would have overwhelmed most analysts. "The Cytherians are adapting," Katie told Blake during their morning briefing. "They've assigned their best strategic mind to study our new tactics." Blake looked at the intelligence report she handed him. "Hive Prince Zexthul, what do we know about him?" "He's different from other Cytherians, sir. Most of them think as part of the collective hive mind, but Zexthul can think independently when needed. He's won battles by doing unexpected things." Blake studied the alien's combat record. Zexthul had never lost a major engagement, so now we're fighting someone who thinks like us. Not exactly like us, sir, but he's learning to counter our tactics. Look at this. Katie pulled up a tactical display showing recent enemy movements. They're starting to use unpredictable attack patterns and splitting their fleets into smaller groups. Blake could see the change. The Cytherian fleets that had once moved in perfect formation were now spreading out and attacking from multiple directions. They were copying human tactics. "What's our response?" Katie smiled. "We evolve faster than they can adapt." She walked to the wall display and called up a training simulation. I've been working with Colonel Amy Peterson to train other species in Deathworld thinking. We're teaching them to handle chaos and make quick decisions under pressure. The training program was intense. Katie pushed alien officers beyond their comfort zones, forcing them to solve problems without perfect information and make decisions while under simulated combat stress. Many of them complained that the training was too difficult, but those who completed it showed remarkable improvement in tactical flexibility. Commander Vextar from Altara was one of the first to volunteer for the program. The tall, blue-skinned officer had initially opposed Katie's methods, but the victory at New Geneva had changed his mind. "This human training is painful," he admitted to Blake after his first week. "But I understand now why Deathworlders think differently. On their planet, slow thinking means death." Katie's program expanded to include officers from 15 different species. She taught them pattern recognition, rapid decision-making, and what she called productive paranoia, the ability to see threats before they became obvious. But the real test came when Zexthol launched his counterstrike. The Catherian prince had studied human tactics and developed a response. Instead of fighting defensively, he began targeting human colonies directly. His strategy was simple: force the humans to fight defensively, and their tactical advantages would disappear. Attacks began in the Outer Rim territories. 3 human colonies were hit simultaneously by small Catherian fleets using hit-and-run tactics, the same methods Katie had developed. "He's trying to beat us at our own game," Katie told Blake as they watched the battle reports come in. "But he doesn't understand the most important part." "Which is?" "Deathworld thinking isn't just about tactics, sir. It's about turning every threat into an opportunity." Katie had been preparing for this moment. She had known that copying human tactics would be the enemy's obvious response. So she had developed something new: cognitive overflow warfare. "The Catherians' greatest strength is their hive mind," she explained to the assembled fleet commanders. "They can coordinate perfectly because they think as one, but that's also their weakness. If we can force them to process too many variables at once, their coordination breaks down." She demonstrated using a complex battle simulation. Multiple human fleets attacked Catherian positions with seemingly random timing and methods. Each attack looked different from the others, forcing the hive mind to analyze multiple tactical problems simultaneously. "It's like trying to have 12 different conversations at the same time," Katie said. "Even the smartest person can't do it effectively." Captain Torres understood immediately. "We hit them everywhere at once, but each attack follows different rules." "Exactly. Some attacks are direct assaults, some are ambushes, some are raids on supply lines. The hive mind tries to coordinate responses to all of them, but each situation requires different thinking." The test of cognitive overflow warfare came at the fortress world of Kepler Prime. The Catherians had turned the planet into their main defensive position in the sector, with massive orbital stations and thousands of defensive platforms. Traditional tactics would require a huge fleet and months of siege warfare to take Kepler Prime. Katie proposed something different: a coordinated attack by 17 small fleets, each using completely different tactics. Admiral Blake was nervous about the plan. "You're asking me to split our forces and attack the enemy's strongest position. I'm asking you to make them think about 17 different problems at the same time, sir. Their hive mind can't handle that much chaos." Blake approved the operation, codenamed Wildfire. Katie coordinated from a mobile command ship, staying in constant communication with all 17 fleet commanders. Each commander had trained in Deathworld thinking and understood their role in the larger pattern. The battle began at 600 hours. Fleet Alpha made a direct assault on the orbital stations, while Fleet Beta conducted hit-and-run attacks on supply convoys. Fleet Gamma used stealth technology to mine hyperspace corridors, while Fleet Delta created false sensor readings to confuse enemy targeting systems. The Catherians tried to respond to each threat, but their coordination began to break down. Ships that should have been defending the orbital stations were chasing phantom attacks. Defense platforms fired at false targets, while real threats slipped past unnoticed. Katie watched the battle unfold from 17 different perspectives simultaneously. Her Deathworld-trained mind processed the chaos easily, seeing patterns that the enemy's hive mind could not handle. Fleet Kappa. Enemy reinforcements are moving to Grid 7-7. Redirect to Grid 9-3. Fleet Omega. Defensive platforms in your sector are offline. Move in now. Fleet Zeta. Create a diversion at the moon base. Draw their attention away from the main assault. The battle lasted only 6 hours, but it felt like days. When it ended, Kepler Prime was in human hands. The fortress world that should have taken months to capture had fallen in a single day. The psychological impact was enormous. Across Cytherian space, hive princes began questioning their coordination strategies. For the first time in their species' history, they experienced the confusion and disorientation that came from facing truly unpredictable opponents. Katie stood in the command center of Kepler Prime, looking at star charts that showed the changing balance of power. Blue dots now outnumbered red dots in 3 sectors. Colonel Peterson approached her with a smile. "The enemy is requesting a communication channel, ma'am. They want to discuss terms." Katie looked at the request with surprise. "Terms? Ceasefire negotiations? It seems Prince Zexthul wants to talk." Blake joined them, reading the communication request over Katie's shoulder. "What do you think, Director?" Katie studied the star charts one more time. The old territorial boundaries no longer mattered. Human tactics had made it possible to strike anywhere, anytime. The very concept of defensive positions had become meaningless. "I think the war is entering a new phase, sir. They're not just trying to win anymore, they're trying to understand how we think." She looked at the communication request again. "Set up the meeting, but keep our fleets ready to move. This might be their next adaptation." Blake nodded. The girl from Earth had changed everything. The maps showed new boundaries, new possibilities, and new dangers. The galaxy was learning that sometimes the most dangerous enemy was the one who refused to fight by the old rules. Outside the station's windows, stars that had been in enemy hands for decades now flew Confederation flags. The Deathworlder's chaos had become the new order. The ceasefire negotiations lasted 3 days and ended in failure. Hive Prince Zexthul had not wanted peace. He had wanted to study Katie's tactics up close. The meeting gave him access to human communication patterns, decision-making processes, and strategic thinking methods. "He played us," Katie admitted to Admiral Blake as they reviewed intelligence reports from the failed talks. "While we were discussing peace terms, he was learning how we think." Blake was angry at himself for trusting the enemy. "What's his next move?" Katie pulled up star charts showing recent Cytherian fleet movements. "He's abandoning their old coordination patterns completely. Look at this." The displays showed something that should have been impossible. Cytherian fleets were operating independently, without the hive mind coordination that had been their greatest advantage for centuries. "He's trying to fight like us," Katie said. "Individual ship commanders making their own decisions, unpredictable attack patterns, hit-and-run tactics. He thinks if he can copy our methods perfectly, he can beat us." Blake studied the tactical data. "Can he?" "No, sir, because he's missing the most important part." Katie walked to the wall display and called up a training simulation from her Deathworld thinking program. "Zexthul can teach his forces to act independently, but he can't give them the background that creates real adaptive thinking. Cytherians evolved on a peaceful world with stable weather and predictable seasons. They've never had to develop the pattern recognition skills that come from surviving chaos." Blake was promoted to Supreme Commander of Confederation Forces, and Katie became the youngest fleet admiral in galactic history. She worked alongside General Ben Clark and Admiral Nina Rodriguez to implement what she called deep cascade strategy across all theaters of war. The new strategy was different from anything that had been tried before. Instead of fighting for individual star systems, human-led forces began targeting the infrastructure that supported Cytherian expansion. Katie had analyzed their empire like a living organism and found its weak points. Their whole civilization depends on resource flows from mining systems to manufacturing worlds to military bases, she explained to the combined fleet commanders. If we disrupt those flows in the right places, we can cause system-wide failures. The Campaign Katie designed did not look like traditional warfare. Human ships appeared in seemingly random locations throughout Catherian space, conducted brief but devastating attacks, and disappeared before reinforcements could arrive. Each strike was designed to force the enemy to redirect resources from other fronts. Cargo ships carrying rare metals were destroyed in hyperspace. Communication relays were sabotaged with viruses that spread through the network. Mining equipment was targeted with precision strikes that looked like accidents but created cascading supply shortages. Zexthul tried to respond by making his forces even more unpredictable, but this broke down what little coordination his fleet still had. Without their hive mind advantage, individual Catherian ships were no match for human crews trained in adaptive thinking. The war's turning point came when Katie proposed the most dangerous operation of her career, a strike directly at the Catherian home system. "You want to attack their capital?" General Clark asked during the planning meeting. "That's the most heavily defended system in the galaxy." Katie smiled. "I don't want to attack it, sir. I want to make them defend it." Her plan was brilliant in its simplicity. Instead of trying to conquer the Catherian homeworld, she would use gravitational weapons to disrupt the star system's asteroid mining operations. The chaos would force them to recall fleets from across the galaxy to protect their industrial base. Once their frontier fleets come home to defend the capital, their occupied territories will be defenseless, Katie explained. "We can recapture 20 systems while they're dealing with the crisis at home." Admiral Rodriguez was skeptical. "The gravitational weapons have never been tested on that scale. What if something goes wrong?" "Then we adapt," Katie said simply. That's what Deathworlders do. Blake approved the operation, codenamed Earthquake. Katie would lead a small strike force directly into the heart of enemy space, while the main Confederation fleets prepared to recapture abandoned territories. The night before the mission, Katie stood in her quarters looking at star charts that showed how much the galaxy had changed. Blue dots now dominated regions that had been red for decades. The old territorial boundaries had become meaningless under the influence of human tactical thinking. Commander Park found her there at 3 in the morning. "Can't sleep either." Katie turned from the charts. "I keep thinking about all the people we've lost. Proxima Station, the colonies, the ships that didn't make it home. You saved more lives than anyone else in this war," Park said. "The casualty reports show that human tactics reduced our losses by 70%. Katie nodded, but she still felt the weight of every decision she had made. Tomorrow will end it, one way or another. The strike force consisted of 12 ships, including Katie's command vessel, the fast corvette USS Lightning. Unlike traditional flagships, the Lightning was built for speed and maneuverability. Katie could reposition quickly as battlefield conditions changed, staying ahead of enemy responses. The journey to the Catherian home system took 2 days through hyperspace corridors that Katie had identified as unmonitored. When they emerged, near the target, they found exactly what intelligence had predicted: massive asteroid mining operations that fed the enemy war machine. "All ships, begin gravitational bombardment," Katie ordered. The human ships fired specialized weapons that created artificial gravity wells throughout the asteroid field. The effect was like dropping rocks into a calm pond. Gravitational waves rippled outward, causing asteroids to collide and mining stations to lose their orbital stability. Within hours, the carefully organized mining operation had become a chaotic debris field. Emergency signals flooded Catherian communication networks as billions of credits worth of infrastructure was destroyed or damaged. Katie watched the chaos spread through enemy space as Catherian fleets received emergency recall orders. Ships that had been occupying Confederation territory for years suddenly abandoned their positions to rush home and defend the capital. "Phase 2 begins now," Katie announced to the Confederation fleet commanders who had been waiting for this moment. Across the galaxy, human-led forces moved into territories that the enemy had just abandoned. Without resistance, they recaptured system after system. The maps changed color from red to blue faster than cartographers could update them. Zexthul tried one last desperate gambit. He led his personal fleet in a direct attack on Katie's position, hoping to end the war by destroying its architect. But Katie had predicted this too. When the prince's ships emerged from hyperspace, they found the human strike force ready and waiting. The battle lasted only 20 minutes. Zexthol's flagship was destroyed, and with it, the last organized resistance of the Catherian Empire. The war officially ended 6 months later with the signing of the Terran Accords. The ceremony took place on Earth, in recognition of humanity's role in achieving victory. Katie stood beside Admiral Blake as representatives from across the galaxy signed the peace agreement. "The galaxy owes a debt to the people of Earth," said the Confederation president. "Your tactical innovations have saved countless lives and secured freedom for billions of beings." Katie looked at the assembled delegates from dozens of different species. They all understood now that victory had come not from superior technology or numbers, but from thinking differently about what war meant. The final ceremony was the presentation of new star charts. The old maps with their rigid territorial boundaries were retired. In their place were flexible zone charts that reflected the new reality. In a galaxy where human tactics could strike anywhere, the concept of static defense lines had become obsolete. Katie returned to her quarters that night and found a message waiting from Admiral Blake. He was retiring and recommended her as his replacement as Supreme Commander. She read the message twice, then walked to her window to look out at Earth's scarred but beautiful surface. The world that other species had called too dangerous to visit had produced the thinking that won the war. The Deathworlder girl who had changed war maps fast had become the architect of galactic peace. And somewhere in the galaxy, other young officers from harsh worlds were learning that sometimes the most powerful weapon was the ability to see patterns in chaos and turn every disadvantage into opportunity.